I'm Carrie Adams, and you're listening to Carrie's Connoisseurs, coming to you from Solid Gold Podcasts. Here we talk to the movers and shakers, the drinkers, the dreamers, and all the people who make it happen in the liquor and luxury industries from around the world. Well, hello everybody, and welcome to another episode of Carrie's Connoisseurs. Today I've got Roelof Lotriet in my studio with me. He's the winemaker at Delheim, and a few weeks ago, it was still this year, Leanne Sutherland, who does a very, very good job of PR for Delheim, I might say, sent me an email and then followed it up quickly with a sample of the most delicious wild ferment chenin blanc. So I'm speaking today to you, Roelof. First of all, welcome and hello. And secondly, we're going to introduce you and your chenin blanc. Hi.
So, thanks for having me.
And you were sick last week. We were supposed to do this last week. Are you feeling better?
Yeah, much better. I literally, Thursday, Friday, I slept practically the whole day. And that's combined is probably more sleep I've had in the last 3 years because I've got two toddlers, a 1-year-old and a 3-year-old. So I feel like I should schedule a 2-day sick week.
Yes, get flu once a month.
Just once a month. I think that's the best thing that can happen to me at this point in time.
Tell me how, quickly, before we go any further, how's your harvest going? Because I've got you slap bang in the middle of the 2023 vintage.
Full speed.
Is it?
Full speed. It was actually quite funny because we'll start with the Pinotage Rosé end of January, maybe the first week in February. And when we did our samplings, I was like, okay, now we're a little bit earlier. But what got me was a mate of mine, another winemaker down the road at David Finlayson.
Yes.
He's just like, yeah, just go check your Chardonnay. Just for interest sake, I was like, I'm not going to pick it another month. Did the sugars, I was like, okay.
No.
This
but
harvest is real.
You've had hectic heat in Cape Town, haven't you? I don't know what the winelands have been like, but Cape Town has been sweltering.
Yeah, no, it's just such a weird. I actually want to call it Durban weather, where it's been humid and it's been very hot, and that obviously increases the disease pressure. And
I was going to say that humidity is not good for our grapes. They don't like that. You're going to get a bit of fruities in between there, I think. Eh?
Yeah, but I mean, and the upside is we're harvesting. I want to say, let's call it a week, 10 days earlier. So the whites, especially the cultivars that tend to rot quicker, they're coming in sooner. So
have you picked the bulk of your? Have you picked the bulk of your whites already?
No. What's in at the moment? All the Chardonnay is in. We're busy. We'll finish up with Sauvignon Blanc today. Tomorrow we'll climb into Chenin Blanc, and then Gewürztraminer I'll leave a little bit later because we want the nice.
Yes, we want those gorgeous. So let me tell everybody a little bit about Roelof, because he's no stranger to the wine industry. He's been making beautiful wine for a long time. You were born in Bloemfontein. We'll forgive you for that. How did your parents end up in Bloemfontein?
They're originally from Joburg. Before I was born, they moved to Bloemfontein. At that time, my dad worked for Bangfin, and my mother was a lecturer now then at the University of Free State. I don't know why they chose Bloem. I think when they got there was maybe one restaurant.
Listen, it's quite nice to be in a little one-horse town like that. I haven't been to Bloemfontein for a long time. But I'm sure it's no longer one horse, and I'm sure that there's lots more going on in Bloem at this stage of the game. Are they still there?
Yeah, well, it's funny enough now, they're both into politics, and my mother's in Parliament, so they've got a place in Cape Town and Bloemfontein, and I literally have to pick up the phone like, where are you today?
Oh, wow, okay. Cape Town, so. Okay, so we've got somebody very important now. Politics. Who wants to go into politics in their Odag? We want to run away a million miles away from politics. We want to drink wine and talk to winemakers. So you grew up in Bloem, and then you went and did your viticulture and your enology at Stellies, at Stellenbosch University. And I know that you did a vintage or two with Kevin Arnold, who's a very dear friend of mine. And for everybody else's knowledge, he was an owner and the winemaker at Waterford for many, many years. Also at Rust and Freda, wasn't he? But you must have done it at Waterford with him.
Yeah, so it's actually an interesting story about Kevin. So we both went to St. Andrews. So he's an old boy. And that was kind of my connection to go harvest at Waterford. And then fast forward 15 odd years, one day I was just sitting in the cell and I was like, hang about, wait. Kevin started at Delheim, went to Ristenfrede, ended up at Waterford. I literally started at Waterford, went to Ristenfrede, ended up at Delheim.
Ended up at
I literally
Delheim.
did his life
That's
in
a bit
reverse in a
spooky.
weird
I hadn't
way.
even thought of it like that. I'd forgotten that Kevin was like Mr. Delheim. When I first came into the wine industry, Kevin was at Delheim. I'd
Yeah.
forgotten that.
So it was, until you see it on paper, because I was writing almost like a blog about my career, and I was just like, hang about, that's oddly
actually
familiar.
that's quite freaky, actually.
It
So
wasn't
you
on
went.
purpose.
You went. It wasn't on purpose. It just happened.
No, it
Sometimes
just
the
happened that way.
universe spins anti-clockwise. You just never know. You also did your, as you mentioned, one of your internships at Ristenfrede, and who was there at the time? Connie.
Yeah, Kuni. It was, I started at Ristenfrede in 2009, 10. I wasn't actually in the tasting room in 2009, and then it was kind of that switch over from Ernie Els and Ristenfrede breaking apart. Then, Ristenfrede Garden Peak was one side and Ernie Els was on the other side. So yeah, it was Kuni at that time, and I worked with Kuni for 5 years as assistant, and then I became winemaker of Guardian Peak, Cirrus, Stellenbosch Reserve, Donkey's
It's a
Pie.
fantastic stable to be in, and a huge amount of experience at what I think is quite phenomenal in South Africa, because we've got big wine farms. It's easy to make a few barrels of nice wine. It's not so easy to make thousands and thousands of barrels of nice wine. So that whole Ristenfrede, Ernie Els, Jean Engelbrecht had Donkey's Pie as well. I think it was another, and Guardian Peak. It's a big stable of wines to be looking after.
And it's just getting bigger as well. So good luck to those guys.
I know. What's the new? What's Louis Strydom now doing something?
Louis got Stellenzicht, and he's got Altoon.
That's right.
And Ernie Els. And I'm not 100% sure if they're making other labels within that at the moment. But I mean, they've got the capacity. It's quite a big operation.
Who did Louis Strydom buy that with? Because there was some. It's not Ernie anymore. Ernie sold. Hey, Ernie sold his wine.
Yeah, I can't give you the exact details. I think there might be shares because I kept the name. Ernie.
I think it was an American consortium or something like that.
I don't know. It's a German Baron von Liechtenstein, something
Oh
like
my
that.
God! There's this German who's been set loose in the Cape Winelands. I need to meet this man. He's buying up my entire industry. I think he's the same one. I think he bought a whole lot of other stuff as well. He's buying. I think didn't he buy Chamonix as well? I think it's the same German.
Could possibly be.
I think we're going to have to get some Achtung on the go there and tell this man to just slow down a bit. Although, why not? If he's got lots of money and a passion for the South African wine industry, why not?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's got something to say. If people are willing to spend money in the South African wine industry, it means that there's definitely positivity coming out.
I know. I mean, really, for all of us, who wants a farm in Africa at this stage of the game? You remember that I had a farm in Africa that Karen von Blixen, she said, well, we all wanted a farm in Africa, but it's not so easy to have that anymore. Yeah. So you went on to Ristenfrede, and then after that you went from there to Delheim?
Yeah, so I mean, I was under the John Engelbrecht umbrella, so it was Ristenfrede, then Guardian Peak with the sub-labels, and then from there to Delheim, yeah.
And how long have you been at Delheim for?
This is my 5th vintage, so practically 5 years.
That's amazing. It's a wonderful family. You know, the Sperling family, I don't suppose they need too much introduction at this stage of the game, but Sput Sperling was one of the building blocks of the South African wine industry. You know, they started so many things, so many initiatives that we now take for granted in the South African wine industry. But his children are running the farm now, because sadly Sput died a few years ago. I think it was about 3 years ago. How long ago did he die? Was it more than that?
Yeah, it was 2017.
Yeah,
it
wasn't all that long
just
ago.
before I showed up. Yeah.
So you never worked with him?
I never worked with him. No.
Yeah, no, he was an
Apparently, a lot of
amazing.
people tell me that's a good thing.
He was
quite
difficult.
a
He was
general.
eccentric as all hell and difficult, but such fun. And I suppose you've got very big shoes to fill because you also there's some sort of signature wines that come from Delheim that you simply can't slip up on, like
Exactly.
Edelspatz. You can't not make Edelspatz. Are you going to get some botrytis this year?
You know, with this Durban weather, the chances are probably good. Again, it's very humid. But you know what it is? 2019, I think because we came out of the drought, so there was a gap, 2017, 16, 17, 18, they just started getting botrytis again. Then 19, when we got rain, I think that was one of the best botrytis vintages I've ever worked with in my life.
Yeah.
And I'm talking about I've worked in Sautern where it's fields of purple. That was it.
I know.
And you know, I think once you get that sort of biomass in the vineyards, it kind of knocks onto your next year as well. And as long as the conditions stay kind of constant year on year out, you'll probably get botrytis.
So let's explain to the listeners how you make this wine, because it's still a complete and utter mystery to me. Even having studied and made some myself, it's a mystery to me that we get this delicious nectar out of a shriveled up little grape. It gives me hope as I grow older and I get lots and lots more wrinkles, that you can still produce something gorgeous stuff.
Yeah. You know, it's you know, a lot of winemakers say it's the vineyards, it's the climate, and it's all made in the vineyards, but particularly this one. If you don't get botrytis, you can't make noble late wine. I mean, that's an equation that you can write in stone, take it to the bank.
Yeah.
It is what nature gives you. But how we make it, I've always noticed in South Africa, our noble lates are very, very sweet. If you taste Sauternes, it tends to be a lot low on the RS. I mean, they bottle in 750 ml, so you can drink the bottle.
Yes.
So I've taken more of that approach. We use Weißer Riesling, probably should mention that. And so what we do basically is, I think if you show the listeners a picture of botrytis, they'll be like, there's not a chance I'm drinking that wine. The grapes bunches look disgusting.
Listen, have you seen that thing that grows in the bottom of a bottle of kombucha or whatever? And the whole world's gone mad drinking kombucha. I'd rather drink that. I'd rather drink your Edelspatz, thanks.
Yeah, so I mean, you bring it in the vineyards. It's almost a greyish purple. They're right. It's like a mold. It's a fur coat on the grapes, essentially. So you bring it in. I mean, when we did it small scale in France, so it's like crates that you throw into this tiny press, and every time you throw a crate in, it's this like cloud of fungi that go
of mold.
And
yeah,
you literally,
horrible.
It's just like, oh, it's disgusting. So we do the same. Our presses are slightly bigger, so it's not. It kind of gets contained on the inside, and then we use a very special yeast that doesn't really ferment into alcohol just yet. It's just so that it can break down the cell walls and protect it microbially. And we leave that for 24 hours to 48 hours till we have a sort of it looks, how do I explain? Almost like it's got like a glaze on the skins.
Yeah, it looks like a reduction that you might pour over a roast duck or something.
Exactly,
doesn't it?
and then.
But firstly, how long do you leave those grapes on the vine for? What sort of barreling do you pick them at?
Here's the thing: I've picked in March and I've picked in June, same block.
Wow.
So it really, again, it's one of those. The vineyard tells you when you're going to pick this. The vineyard tells you, okay, we're making Noble Late this year. But I technically look for about 36 bricks, almost. Let's call it 12% alcohol potential, which gives me a lovely balance, and I get to about 180 RS at 12 alcohol, between 160 and 180, and then because it's Weißer Riesling, I get such a natural acid, which balances it out much better than if I had to use Sauvignon or Semillon, which is great. So I think it's such a versatile cultivar for Noble Late. I think a lot of more people should do it, and it makes it very easy. Ferment slowly. It's actually funny. Sometimes we're done with harvest. 2 months later, we pick. And then the whole team's like, oh, I gotta get everything
all over again.
dirty, and it's
You don't make it every year, but you do make Spatzendreck, hey, which is natural sweet.
Yeah, Spatzendreck.
Not Noble Late.
It's not Noble Late. Spatzendreck is kind of, it's always get some vineyards that give us a little bit more sweet here, chenin or a muscat, so we try play around with that. We have the idea to take it back to what it originally was in the beginning, where it was just really, I wouldn't say off-dry, but semi-sweet, where it's a bit too close to the Edelspuds at the moment with the sugar level. So I think we're just going to go back to having it semi-sweeter.
Anyway, I interrupted you. So now we've got this lovely sort of glazy type consistency in the tank. And then what are we doing?
Oh no, in the press. So this is still in the press.
Oh, we're still in the press.
We're still in the press. So now we have to, and it's whole bunch. That's the stalks, everything. Good luck trying to put that through a destalker and pump the. So do a whole bunch. We leave it over 24 hours, sometimes 48, and then we press it, and then we get this weird syrup, grey black syrup that you'll be like, again, I'm not going to drink that. Then we ferment it, and then you'll see after a while when it's done fermenting.
So do you have to inoculate with yeast, or does it have wild ferment?
It can go naturally. The only problem with sugar is everything wants to eat that sugar. Any and every sort of bacteria, yeast, whatever's in your cellar, they want to eat that sugar. So it's a high risk, and I think So you
control it, right?
I'd rather control it, and then I can set the temperature and the tempo, and use a yeast that can handle the sugar and the alcohol at the end of the day. So if you get stuck ferments on high RS, no, that's a nightmare.
Yeah. And then how long do you allow it to ferment for?
So again,
you stop the fermentation.
Yeah. So I'll stop it at about 12, and I look for a decent balance. So if I see the RS is about between 160 and 180, and the ethanol is 12, and the acid is 7, 8, then I'll be like, this is actually well balanced taste, and then I'll stop the fermentation. I'll cross flow the filter the sweet stuff, so then it takes out all the yeast and the lees. So I've literally got this clear golden syrup that I then put into barrel. Okay, so we've fermented. Once the balance is there between the RS and the alcohol, then I'll stop the fermentation via cross flow, which is just a very fine filtration system that takes out all the yeast. Again, when you're sitting with 180 grams of sugar, everything and anything wants to eat that, and it'll start fermentation again. So we get the wine completely clean, and then we put into barrels. I use 2 to 5 liter French oak barrels, older barrels. I just feel I want the vessel. I don't really want new wood or anything. The sweet wine is so aromatic and so. Why would you want to add French terroir into that? That doesn't make much sense to me.
No.
So it's just, and then I want to say I leave it for 12 months, but it's anywhere between 9 and 12. It's one of the most high-risk wines you have in your winery. So even opening it up to tasting it, you're allowing some sort of microorganism back into the barrel.
I know, and then what we could end up with is, as you say, a secondary fermentation. Then we could end up with Weiss Riesling Noble Lake Bubbly.
It's not my favorite.
It wouldn't be advisable.
And then, so I mean, we've been lucky. I think we've been getting close to 9-12 months year in, year out. From there, we'll take it out. I'll give it a little touch of bentonite just to stabilize it, protein stabilize it. And then that goes to bottle from there. Again, through a sterile filtration, because you don't want something happening in the bottle.
Yeah, no, I know that it makes you marvel all over again at the sublime, the unbelievable beauty of those sauternes in France. They are so refined and so delicate and so pretty and so beautiful. And when you know how hard, it really is labor intensive, the sticky wine business. It's very labor intensive. And you know why it's so expensive? South African sticky wine is way too cheap, as far as I'm concerned.
If you do the numbers,
we should be charging a lot more for our.
I don't think people understand your average recovery, or let's use apples with apples, with white wine, you would get about 60 to 65% recovery. That's now obviously from weight to juice. With Noble, I get 25-30% if I'm lucky.
If you're lucky.
So you got to have a lot to make a little.
And no, we should be charging a lot more for that. The Weißer Riesling vineyard that you use for that, is it quite an old one? Because it's always been Weißer Riesling.
It's the oldest block on the farm. It's called the office block, which because it's right next to the office. Very creative.
Yeah.
But I mean, somehow I don't have facts and evidence for you, but somehow I believe that just adds to the fact that we get good noble. I think young blocks come in, almost fresh and clean with no sort of idea what's going on, but these older Weißer Riesling block, or the Weißer Riesling.
Roelof, everything old is nice. You'll get to realize everything old is nice. Help me. So I'm busy talking to you about sticky wine because I love sticky wine. I could drink it for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And as you say, if it's made the way you make it, where it's not too sweet, and that sounds stupid because sticky wine is always sweet, but we know what I'm talking about. It's not sickly, cloyingly sweet. It's delicate. It's refined. It's pretty. It's viscous. It's so aromatic. It's so delicious in your mouth. You just want to drink that whole bottle. In fact, if you put it into a magnum bottle, I could finish it in a day. And everybody thinks it's going to make you drunk and give you a terrible hangover, and it doesn't really. The alcohols are not that really high on that wine, are they?
No, I mean, we've got a very weird idea of sweet wine in South Africa sometimes. I think you explained it. It doesn't have to be overly sweet. It just has to be in balance. You don't want to pour the bottle and it looks like syrup coming out. And then you have that little tot. It's got to be, if you want a period of the meal, you want more than 2 sips at least. So
you want a whole
exactly.
bottle. I want a whole bottle too.
We was somewhere in Barca, some chateau, and we did a 5-course wine pairing at Chateau Cote. And we started with which I understand the French. You start with sauternes, with foie gras, whatever it might be, and then but we just had noble late starters, and you didn't get that sick sweet feel. It was just went through the whole meal and was beautiful. And I mean, I tell the story a lot to people. Like, sweet wine is actually not a dessert wine. I know we call it a dessert wine.
No.
But you should be able to drink it through your entire meal.
Oh no, I agree with you 100%. And it really does bring out, I think, some of the best in food. I always try and encourage people to drink sweeter wines. And when I say sweeter wines, people who don't drink wine as a general rule. And if you think for yourself, I mean, when we first started drinking wine, we all started drinking, what was it, Autumn Harvest crackling or something. It was terrible stuff, but we drank it and it was sweet. And it gives you an idea in your head of the flavors and the aromatics that come from grapes that then help you to distinguish going forward which ones you actually like better. So I think a lot of people talk dry and drink sweet. I know I do a lot of the time. I used to, because I used to be embarrassed to say I love demi-sec bubbles, or I love Edelspatz, or I love Chateau de Chem, or I do. I love sweet stuff. There's a time and a place for dry stuff as well, but that sweet stuff is just gorgeous with food. But I'm rabbiting on about the sweet stuff. I actually called you to speak to you about your wild ferment Chenin Blanc, because that's an old vineyard. In fact, I think it was planted the same year you were born. Am I right?
So to me, it's very special. Anything planted in that year has to be good.
Of course.
So it was planted in '86. And when I started, the wild ferment wasn't old vine. It was a mixture of different vineyards on the farm. But when you start fermenting every parcel separately, and you realize, these old vines have a story to tell. I always describe old vines as kind of like, you get that uncle or that aunt or whatever at the campfire or at the table that just has the best stories, and everyone just sits in awe and listens. That's really what old vines are. But I have to be honest, old vine doesn't equal good wine. This block just, not always. This block just happens to be amazing. And it really, we say old vine is 35 years old, but I feel like some vineyards at the age of 20, 22 just kick into that next gear. Sometimes it takes longer than 35 years. Sometimes it takes 40 years. How do I describe this? It goes from just this linear Chenin, I'm using Chenin as an example, to this broader. I always call it like an oily type of wine, but people crucify me for that. But that's my descriptor.
I agree with you.
It goes from walking in line to going the other direction. You know what I mean? So it's just a different one.
Yeah, no, it becomes sort of Rubenesque. You know, those very fat little cherubs that they painted on the ceilings of chapels and things. It goes from being a skinny, drawn, anorexic thing to a little Rubenesque type girl or a fat cherub. That's
exactly it.
And loads
that's exactly it. And again, I mean, like I said, we classified old wine now as 35 years in this country, but a vineyard at the age of 20 that's been allowed to grow its roots deep into the soil and hasn't been hindered or struggled or it can get you the same sort of result a bit earlier. But I think this block is just it. For the 5 years that I've been here, it's always just been that one block that's so different. It happens to be old vine, so I'm assuming that has to be the reason. It just makes a beautiful wine.
And it was one of the first certified old vine blocks in the country, I think, if I remember correctly. But when I tasted that bottle, just so that everybody knows what we're talking about, you use the word balance a lot, and it comes through hugely in your wine. It really, really does. This Chenin Blanc, it's called Wild Ferment, hey? That's what it's called. Yeah. And it's the 2021 release.
Correct.
That we're talking about, and it's just been released now, so it's available in stores if you want to go and get some. But I don't think there's loads and loads and loads of it about. But I'll tell you what that wine tastes and feels like. I love Chenin Blanc because it's sort of fruit salad-ish for me. So it's never really one thing or the other. I get mangoes and pawpaws and pineapples and gooseberries. However, this wine, it's reminiscent of green and white fruits for me. It's quite steely for Chenin Blanc, which I love because it reminds me of Vouvray a bit. You've got oak on it, obviously, somewhere. You've either got oak or you've put it on the lees for some time. I don't know. I haven't looked at the analysis sheet. But it's got this unbelievable purity of fruit on it. Terribly, terribly clear, bright, light fruit. It's beautiful. It's really beautifully made wine. I was so excited when I tasted it. I haven't drunk it ever before. I've never drunk that wild ferment Chenin. It was delicious.
Yeah. I mean, look, again, maybe because it's the same age as I am, I put more attention to it than any other wine. But no, that white fruit, I love that. That's kind of my direction when I think of Chenin. That's where I want to go. But every year, I sit with, she was then my assistant, she's now a winemaker, Noni. And you just, you can't just do the same thing every year. You got to go, how can we make this wine better? And what's missing? And we're at the point now where it's about, let's say, argument's sake, 30% is in concrete egg tanks.
Okay.
The remainder is in 500-liter French oak barrels, all third full or older.
I was going to say, must be not first floor because it's not a carrot. It's just there.
New wood has a place. I'm not against new wood, especially in reds, but there's something that I hate is when I open a wine, pour it, and I smell, these are limousine barrels, or, it's...
That you can identify the actual oak.
This is French terroir, I'm going to say this, and I use this a lot. I don't know who said it or when they said it or whatever, but I'm going to claim as if it's mine until someone tells me, no, this is actually X and Y's. But
mine.
For me, oak is the bass player in a band. When it's playing, you don't hear it, but when it's not playing, you miss it. That's what oak should be.
That's so clever. That's absolutely
exactly,
what
and
it
even
is.
more so in South African wine. When we've got amazing fruit, amazing terroir to showcase, don't go and hide it behind French oak or whatever oak you might use. But
No.
So
I do agree with you. I think that you boys, though, you're all part of a new wave of winemakers, and thank goodness we evolve and we were given brains, and we can learn and we can experiment and we can find out what's good and what's bad, and we don't keep on making the same mistake. Because I think wine from South Africa, certainly when I was living overseas, I came back and I tasted South African wine and I was so horrified. It was so oaky. There was such terrible misuse of oak. And I don't think it was done out of anything other than a desire to try and, as you say, maybe be more French, maybe emulate those people who have made these unbelievable wines for hundreds and hundreds of years. I don't know. But you boys, there's this whole new wave of you young winemakers who have changed the face of South African wine so beautifully. And I think every time I taste, there's very little shitty wine out there at this stage of the game. If you think of it, most of the wine that I taste, and I get millions of bottles sent to me every month, I taste almost everything that ever gets bottled. There's very little that I wouldn't have on my table. You're all making really nice wine. But every now and again, something just sticks out. And that chenin blanc, it's like white. I don't know if we get them in this country, but there used to be a thing called a Bartlett pear. It was a specific type of pear. And it made the prettiest blossom on the tree that you've ever seen in your life. They might have been English pears, I don't know. It might just be somebody, maybe one of my listeners knows. And those Bartlett pears were part of, I think, the pears that went into tins. When we were little, we used to get tin pears, tin peaches, tin guavas. And I think it was Bartlett pears that went into those tins. And it had such a specific smell and taste. And that's what your Chenin Blanc reminded me of. White, pure white pears with this beautiful hint, I don't know, frangipani maybe. I don't know what I was smelling. I don't know what I was picking up on it, but it was Bartlett pears, this white, clean fruit. So how many bottles or how many cases of that wine did you manage to make?
So, I mean, it's a single block vineyard, so we're quite restricted in how much we can make. So the 2021, I think we've managed to get about 8,000 liters, so that's, 12,000 odd bottles?
That's not bad.
So it's not a lot. But if you think in a global context, that's, this shop in the UK gets 6 bottles. That shop, so it's...
I was going to say, I suppose you're sending it all overseas, you bugger.
No, we've got a good spread. I think we've got a good local following as well, which is great. It's always nice to have your home team.
If I was to ask you, what's your favorite wine to make? What would it be?
Favorite wine to make? I can tell you off the bat, I hate making sweet wine just purely because it's a nightmare.
And you make it so beautifully.
Yeah, that's I don't know what's it, out of hardship comes enlightenment. That's what sweet wine is. I always enjoy the thing with the wild fermenters. I want to claim that I make it, but it's really like I shove it into tanks and close them up and say, go with God, it's making itself. So I will intervene if I see it's going on the wrong direction, but
I think you discipline it from time to time.
Like, again, if we have to talk about old vines, the comparison I always give people is young vineyards are really like school children, where you have to send them to school and guide them in a direction, hope to God they turn out all right. Where old vineyards, especially now. Old vineyards, again, it's like that. They've seen many winters. They've been around the block. They've got so many stories to tell. So let them tell the stories. Let them do the wild fermentation. Those roots are deep. The fruit is more intense.
Yes.
I love making that. But I'm also a sucker for red wines, especially Cabernets.
I know. And you're on a farm that is very well poised to make some of the best Cabernet in the country, really. That terroir where you are is just absolutely gorgeous. So what red wine are you making?
The Grand Reserve. Well, right now we've only got the Merlot coming in today. Well, I lie. Our Pinot Charge is already in and dry. That's dry even before we get a Wyatt.
Oh, really?
That stuff ferments in 3 days. It's not one of my favorite wines to make. It's just hard work for.
Tell me about the pinotages that you're all making, because I have honestly apologized to pinotage publicly and internationally. I've apologized to pinotage because I was really very, very rude about it about 30 years ago, and I think with good reason. It was horrible. It was really horrible, and we all know what the boys in Stellenbosch were trying to do when they made pinotage, but it was just dreadful. Now, however, There's just so many pinotages that are tasting quite Rhonish.
So
They taste, hey, they don't taste like those sticky, jammy, acetic kind of
Exactly.
hot, sweaty
So
red berries. They
there's
taste
now
lovely.
the new school, or the new wave, like you probably mentioned earlier, the young winemakers. The one that seems to be quite popular is the whole Rhone carbonic or carbonic maceration style.
That's it, yeah.
And then there's what I'm doing, where you take a step back and you look at the parent material. If it now is the truth, I'm hearing so many different stories that Pinotages, Pinot Noir, and Cinsault Hermitage. Those happen to be the two most delicate cultivars on planet Earth. Why do you want to make a Cabernet out of it? You know what I mean?
Exactly. And why put so much oak on it?
Exactly.
As you say, that you can't taste. And Hermitage isn't Hermitage
Exactly.
Shiraz? Where I come from, Hermitage is Shiraz.
So it's pretty much the Rhone
doesn't get-
varietals, the Cinsault. So
It is.
I can understand, South African, we like big red wines. And if you had to take a snapshot of Pinotage 30 years ago into what it's now, it's chalk and cheese. It really is.
I know. It was almost crammed into the bottle, that stuff, and you had to
The
like
guys
pull
that
it
can't
out.
get it right, Canonkop,
It's-
that still make these big,
Oh, they do make. But Aubrey, we pray to Aubrey at night.
so
That's
hats
how
off to
good
them,
he
but I
is.
feel like there's so much delicacy that you can get out of Pinotage by not hammering
Yeah.
beep the hell out of it every
Yeah,
2
yeah.
hours, and I feel like we're picking maybe a half a barrel earlier, and we use things like enzymes, so I don't have to thrash it. I can now literally ferment it. I can do,
No.
for argument's sake, 4 to 5 pump overs or punch downs a day instead of every 2 hours, and I can preserve more of the elegant side of Pinotage and put that into a bottle.
And it is. Your Pinotage is very elegant. It's pretty. It's like a ballerina. It's very, very pretty. It's got long, skinny legs, and it stands on its toes and it quivers a bit. And that's a far cry from what those big, fat, cloddoppy, horrible Pinotages used to be. So you say your Pinotage is in already, and it's in barrel.
It
or what?
really is. It's always the funniest thing of the season is I have a dry red before dry white or rosé. It ferments in three to 4 days
Wow.
and it's done, and it comes in roughly, because it's dry land, it ripens a little bit faster than the other Pinotage that we use for rosé.
And Roelof, do you cold ferment? Do you cold ferment your
Not
Pinotage?
not to the extent that it's for a very long period of time. I do like to keep it nice and cool. But after I've tried to ferment that stuff at 15 degrees, so it will ferment in 3 days. Pinotage will ferment in 3 days. You can write it in the book.
And maybe it needs to. Maybe that's what's stopping it from having that fruity taste that so many of those old Pinotages, maybe they left them fermenting for too long.
Yeah. Again, I can't speak for the guys that were making wine 30 years ago, but I'm assuming they definitely, my opinion is they probably approached it like Cabernet to really extract.
I'm sure. It was red and it was quite big and it was prolific and it was ours and it was nice and let's go,
And
So that's Pinotage. Your Grand Reserve 5-way blend.
yeah, well, it's not a set blend. It's going to always be Cabernet dominant. Purely, when the Simonsberg Cabernet it's king, yeah. It has to.
Have to be.
The nicest thing, and that's why I joined Delheim actually, is for Cabernet and the Grand Reserve.
Yeah.
The briefing, I think that's the right opdracht briefing, for the wine was just make the best damn wine you can make from our property. Whether it's one barrel, whether it's 30,000 liters,
And
that's
you
all you
do.
have to do. And it's not going to take long. If you taste the Cabernet, you're going to be like, okay, this is going to be the backbone. It's going to be the hero of the dish.
Yeah, it's got to be the
Exactly.
skeleton that you hang all the clothes
And
on afterwards.
then we play around with Petit Verdot, Cabernet Franc, Merlot, and it will vary from year to year. I hate it when South Africans, when we get stuck on it has to be 60, 30, 10%, year in, year out, or whatever it might be.
No.
If your Cabernet is better than, or your Cabernet Franc is better than your Cabernet, then make the Cabernet Franc the hero of the dish, because it's better.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
we play around, and I'll be honest, I get a lot of my other winemaker friends around when we do the blending. I have to make sure.
I want to come and do that blending with you one year. I can remember when I first came back and got into the South African industry, Tim Hutchinson from Douglas Green, Birmingham in those days, DGB, he was the agent for Delheim. And for my birthday, he gave me a bottle. I must think carefully. I think it was a 1982 Grand Reserve. That must have been made by Kevin.
Yeah.
I don't know who was made. It must have been Kevin.
No, it was definitely Kevin. Kevin made the first one. I think that 81 was the first one, so it was definitely Kevin. 82.
It was 82,
yeah,
I think.
So it's OG.
And I was absolutely blown away. It was one of the most beautiful bottles of South African red I've ever. It's a red blend from South Africa that definitely flies under the radar. Everybody, we need to shout about that wine from the rooftops because it really is super smart wine.
The funny thing about it is locally, $400 or $500 a bottle of wine, it sounds very expensive. As soon as you go over to Europe, the commentary is, if you really can't afford the best Bordeaux, here's a bottle of Grand Reserve for 500, for less than nothing, and it punches
really?
at the same weight, so.
Yeah.
No, definitely. It makes it difficult.
So you make a Merlot, you make a standalone Merlot, a Pinotage, Grand Reserve. You don't make a Shiraz.
We used to. That now goes into Shiraz Cab blend, more for the lifestyle range, more accessible. And then we obviously have a standalone Cabernet. And then from there it's the Grand Reserve and the VC Pinotage, the Very Cruise Pinotage. And then this is now for the reds. We're playing now with some experimental single vineyard blocks like the Cabernet Franc. We've got a block of Tempranillo we planted for global warming purposes to see if it's actually going to make a difference.
Nice.
And then let's not go down that route.
Global warming's a bit like the bloody plastic bags that they've done away with. I'm sure there are biodegradable plastic bags. Instead, we have to go to Woolworths and buy these material bags. I now have a bag cupboard in my kitchen that's worth about 2.5 million rand, because every time I go to Woolworths, I forgot to take last week's Woolies bag with me.
Yeah,
so
I've got bags within bags.
And then you don't want to throw it away. Oh man, it's a bit like global warming. It all gets on my nerves, quite frankly. I know we have to take cognizance, but it's a bit annoying. So we've got Tempranillo that you're never going to make up.
Well, that's the same. We've got a single vineyard release that we're going to do, about 1,000 bottles. I think it's just so that people understand the terroir a bit more, because when you buy the Cabernet, it's almost a mix of different Cabernets. Now we've isolated a block, and a block of Cabernet Franc and the Tempranillo, and then the idea is, every year or maybe next year we'll do Petit Verdot. So it's just 1,000 bottles. It's just, so you understand Delheim.
It's nice to be able to do what you want.
It depends who's listening.
I'll give you a free license to do what you want. Is Nora listening?
We've got a good understanding. We've got a great vision of what we want to do and what we want to achieve. We're starting to, look, when Delheim really started making wine commercially, we had to make everything for everyone, because there was a handful of wineries. So you would just make everything for everyone. And fast forward now, we are focusing on certain lines, especially Cabernet would be one of them, Grand Reserve, Edelspatz, Chardonnay, Surly, the things that we can do, and we can do extremely well. So we've got to stick to our strength.
You can do everything very well in Stellenbosch. That's the thing. We're all jumping around shouting about other areas in the Cape, which are good, but we have to concede that Stellenbosch is the capital of winemaking in South Africa.
I'm working with...
It really, really is. What are you into your 40th or 50th vintage at Delheim at this stage of the game?
Well, not my 40th, but yeah.
Not yours, darling, not
actually,
yours.
We've been making wine now for the last 83 years.
But I think
Oh, the Sperlings from Spuds.
the Sperlings are in. They must be about
Yeah,
40 or
around
50 years
Yeah.
of making them. It's an amazing track record. Roelof, your wild ferment chenin is extraordinary. It's just beautiful. And I would urge everybody to go out and try and find at least a bottle. There's not a lot out there. But do try and go and find a bottle. It's well worth whatever the money is. How much does it cost?
It's probably about 180 Rand. What a steal.
Oh, so cheap at the price. Go and buy a
I just
case
wanted to
and
say,
take
let's
it
make it
down.
300. It's just released. It's not the price now. It's
This is where Nora gets us when we off this interview and says, that was 500 Rand a
no, but I
bottle.
mean, if you can't get it in the
It's
shops or you
delicious.
struggle, then just get it online. It's on our website.
Okay, I was going to ask, is it on the website? That's fantastic. We love you. We love the wine you make. You're part of that brave young army of Venus warriors who are changing the face of South African wine. So thank you very, very much. And until we speak again, good luck with your harvest.
And I'll definitely keep you in the loop when we do Grand Reserve blend. It'll actually be awesome to have here.
I want to come and blend. I'll fly down and
The
come and
100%.
taste. We'll have a big...
Yeah,
Oh, I'd
around
love
there.
to.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, my sweetie. Thanks so much for your time. Bye.
Another production from Solid Gold Podcasts.